The river was never on any map. It wound through the world in the way dreams do, never quite in the same place twice, yet always exactly where it needed to be. You found it, or perhaps it found you, on a morning that smelled of forgotten things, rain on old wood, the faint trace of lavender in pages never turned, the cool breath of early fog across a window pane. It waited at the edge of a quiet meadow, water as smooth as memory, as still as a held breath. There were no birdsong or footsteps. Only the gentle hush of reeds swaying and the occasional ripple where something unseen stirred beneath the surface. You didn't remember deciding to step closer. The grass parted softly, as if it too had been expecting you. A narrow wooden boat rested just at the bank, tethered not by rope but by stillness. It didn't creak or rock. It waited. You stepped in. It accepted your weight like an exhale. No oar. No sail. The boat drifted with the current that seemed not to flow forward or back, but deeper. Around you, the world leaned in. Trees thick with silvered bark and pale blue moss stretched overhead, their branches forming soft arches like cathedral ribs. Light filtered down not in beams, but in shimmers, as if refracted through memory itself. You didn't wonder where you were going. The river had a way of silencing questions. Not with answers, but with quiet. With time stretched thin and smooth like silk. As the boat carried you, the air began to hum, not a sound exactly, but a sensation in your chest, like a song remembered only in dreams. On the left bank, a stone figure watched you pass. It had no eyes, no face, only the suggestion of a head tilted and listening. On the right, a willow's long arms dipped their fingers into the water, trailing behind like threads of thought left unfinished. You leaned back against the curve of the boat. Let your fingers skim the surface. The water was warm. Or cool. Or neither. It felt like a hand you once held long ago. And as you drifted, you began to feel it, something loosening inside. Not painfully. Gently. Like untying a knot that had lived too long in your chest. You couldn't quite remember what had been tangled. Only that it was easing. The river knew. That much was clear. It didn't ask who you were. It didn't need to. Names had no place here. Only feelings too large for words, carried away one ripple at a time. The boat turned without turning. It shifted in the way thoughts do when they drift from memory to dream, without edges, without decision. The trees leaned lower now, brushing their leaves against one another in whispers too soft to interpret. You weren't meant to understand. Only to feel. And so you did. With each breath, the air thickened slightly, like the moment before tears, like the pause between laughter and remembering why it began. The sky above the river had changed, though you couldn't say how. It was still blue, still open, but the light had softened, glowing not from a sun but from the water itself. Each ripple carried with it a glow, a soft pulse like a firefly's blink, and it lit your face in flickers that matched your slowing heartbeat. Along the bank, the world began to shift. Stones arranged themselves into soft spirals. Wildflowers turned their faces toward the boat as you passed, each one pulsing with a color that didn't exist in waking hours, blue tinged with thought, lavender threaded with memory. And still, you drifted. You saw, for a moment, a figure farther downstream. A woman? A shadow? She stood at the edge of the bank, her head tilted toward you, arms resting at her sides as if waiting, not for you, but for the moment. When you blinked, she was gone. Not vanished. Absorbed into the stillness. The river turned again, carving into a place where the trees pulled back and let the sky yawn open. Here, the clouds hung low and slow, drifting with you in companionable silence. You reached over the side of the boat again, letting your fingertips trail in the water. This time, they caught on something, light, but solid. You lifted it, a small, smooth stone, flat and warm, with a single-edged line running across its surface. Not a symbol. Not a word. Just a mark. You held it in your palm. The hum inside your chest deepened. Not louder. Fuller. As if the river had placed something into you rather than taken anything away. The boat dipped slightly as it passed under an archway of stone, moss-covered and worn smooth by time you'd never lived. The arch wasn't ancient. It was timeless. And as you passed beneath it, you felt a presence press gently against your skin. Like a blanket pulled close. Like being remembered. You exhaled without meaning to, and the sound of it seemed to echo across the water in a way that made the trees pause their whispering. The river accepted your breath and carried it forward. The archway gave way to a wide bend in the river where the current slowed so much that time itself seemed to pause with it. The air thickened, velvet soft and tinged with a golden haze that shimmered just above the surface of the water. The boat drifted more slowly now, not from resistance, but as though the river wished to show you something. You looked to the banks and saw them dotted with tall reeds, each one topped by a single glowing seed. The seeds floated in place, suspended in the air just above the stalks, gently rotating, each with its own rhythm. They did not fall. They pulsed. As your boat passed, they began to sway, not from the breeze, for there was none, but in time with your heartbeat. You didn't know how you knew that. You simply did. You watched as one of the seeds broke free and hovered closer to the boat. It shimmered faintly, then gently landed in the palm of your hand. It was weightless. Cool. Whispering something not in words, but in breath and memory. You closed your fingers around it and it dissolved, no heat, no sound. Just an echo left behind that felt like a thought you'd nearly forgotten. Something about a time you sat beside a window in late autumn, watching leaves drift like embers. A moment long gone, yet still warm. The boat continued, the reeds behind you still pulsing in your rhythm, fading slowly into the mist. The golden haze thickened ahead, not like fog, but like memory half remembered. Shapes formed and dissolved within it, arches of light, outlines of forgotten rooms, silhouettes of people you'd once loved. None of them spoke. They didn't need to. They nodded, smiled, turned away, and each time they did, a little more weight lifted from your chest. The river did not steal. It returned. Returned space. Returned stillness. Returned parts of you hadn't realized were missing. As you drifted farther, the sky above shifted color, not to dusk, not to dawn, but to something in between. A soft rose violet that made everything below glow gently in response. The trees along the riverbank had begun to change as well. Their trunks twisted upward in slow spirals, bark dark and smooth, and their leaves a translucent silver, catching and reflecting every flicker of light as you passed. One leaf drifted down and landed in the boat beside you. You touched it, and it sang, just one note, low and clear, a sound that moved through your fingertips and into your chest. You didn't flinch. The river was tuning you, preparing you for what lay ahead, not a destination, but a deeper stillness. A silence that welcomed. You leaned back again, letting your eyes half close as the boat carried you forward into the shimmer. The shimmer ahead brightened not with intensity but with warmth, as if the river itself had drawn closer to a memory too soft to speak aloud. The boat glided through the haze and emerged into a wide, open basin where the water turned glassy and mirrored the sky above with impossible clarity. For a moment, you weren't sure where the world ended and its reflection began. You were floating between them, suspended in a stillness too perfect to disturb. In that pause, the air around you grew quiet, as though the river had taken a deep breath and was holding it, just for you. And in that breathless calm, you felt yourself start to forget. Not in the way things are lost, but in the way burdens dissolve. Names, places, timelines, the ticking clocks of memory. They began to fall away like petals on the surface of water. You watched as a small ripple formed beside the boat and something rose slowly from beneath it. A flower. Perfectly shaped, the color of moonlight on snow. It hovered on the surface beside you, unfurling petal by petal without touching the boat. From its center came a faint pulse, like a heartbeat just under your skin. You leaned in. The scent was impossible to describe, something between the warmth of sunlit linen and the coolness of morning mist. As you inhaled, your shoulders sank a little lower, your chest loosened, and the tension you hadn't realized you were holding slipped quietly from your body. The flower began to drift alongside the boat, carried not by current, but by intention. It wanted you to follow. The boat responded, a subtle shift in direction, and you passed beneath a curtain of hanging moss that glowed faintly at the edges. The air grew cooler here, not cold, just crisper. Fresh. Like the first breath after a long cry. Along the banks, new structures had emerged, stone arches and crumbled walls half swallowed by vine and moss. Not ruins. Remnants. Echoes. Pieces of lives that had long since merged with the river's remembering. As you passed them, you felt no sadness. Only reverence. They were part of it now. Part of you. One wall bore a faded handprint carved deep into its surface. You reached out, brushing your fingertips across it as you drifted by, and for a heartbeat, you felt someone else's breath within your own. Someone who once stood where you now passed. The boat didn't slow. It understood what needed to be remembered, and what could be let go. You closed your eyes for a moment. When you opened them, the basin had narrowed once more into a stream, winding gently between tall, whispering grasses. The flower still drifted beside you. Not leading. Accompanying. And ahead, just beyond the next bend, the shimmer deepened. Something was waiting. But not urgently. It would wait as long as it needed. Because here, nothing was in a hurry. The bend in the river curved like a sigh, slow and deliberate, guiding the boat into a narrower channel where the world grew dimmer, not darker, but quieter. The reeds along the bank grew taller here, some nearly twice your height, their soft plumes brushing against one another with a sound like distant rainfall on paper. You passed through this corridor as though being read gently, page by page. The air carried the scent of lavender and something older, cedar, perhaps, or the breath of a forest dreaming. The flower continued to glide beside you, its light dimming slightly as if it too was slowing its thoughts, curling inward for rest. You watched its reflection in the river, then your own, though your reflection had already begun to soften. The lines of your face, the exact shade of your eyes, the edges of your hair, blurred, like a memory seen through a half-waking dream. You didn't mind. There was comfort in the blur. Freedom in being unnamed. The river whispered to you then, not in language, but in feeling. You felt the sensation of being held, of being known without being defined. And with that came another loosening. A name flickered in your mind, one you'd carried for so long it had become a weight. You didn't forget it. You simply let it go, like a coat no longer needed in warm light. The grasses parted ahead, revealing a stretch of open water where the banks dipped low and a series of small wooden platforms extended over the surface. They were connected by weathered walkways, floating just above the river. Shapes moved across them, figures wrapped in soft robes, their faces hidden, their presence neither alarming nor unfamiliar. They paused as your boat drifted near, then offered small nods of welcome before returning to their quiet tasks, tending to floating lanterns, smoothing folded fabrics, placing tiny bowls of flickering light at the water's edge. One of them approached, hands outstretched. You did not resist as the boat eased to a stop beside the platform. The figure helped you step out, not hurried, not forced, simply present, guiding. Their touch was cool and steady, like the surface of still water. You stood for the first time in what felt like days or perhaps no time at all. The platform was solid beneath your feet, yet it shifted gently with the river's breath. The flower, still glowing faintly, circled the platform once before gliding away downstream, its role complete. The figure turned without a word and began to walk along the connected paths. You followed, feet bare against warm, smoothed wood. Around you, the lanterns flickered not with fire but with memory. Each one pulsing gently, casting soft colors into the mist. Every few steps, you passed another platform where a figure knelt, eyes closed, hands resting on knees or held over the water. No one spoke. There was no need. The silence was complete and full and alive. The figure ahead led you along the wooden walkway until it opened onto a wide circular platform at the center of the still water. It floated without anchors, yet held its place with quiet certainty. In its center stood a low stone bowl filled not with water or flame, but with slow-turning mist, soft ribbons that curled and folded as though they were alive, listening. Around the bowl, for other figures sat in perfect stillness, their eyes closed, hands resting in their laps, expressions serene beneath the hoods of their robes. The figure who guided you gestured for you to sit beside them. You did. Without hesitation. The wood beneath you was warm, holding the heat of a sun you hadn't seen but somehow felt. As you sat, the bowl stirred. The mist within it rose slightly, tendrils lifting and coiling outward like a breath being drawn. The others did not move. You didn't either. The stillness held you all. You closed your eyes. Behind your lids, light danced softly, pale blues, warm golds, silvers threaded with violet. They pulsed gently, like a lullaby sung without sound. And in that quiet, you began to remember, not the facts of your life, but the feelings. The way rain once felt on your skin during a walk you never finished. The sound of someone humming in another room. The warmth of a hand in yours during a moment when everything else had crumbled. You remembered not through thought, but through sensation. The mist inside the bowl thickened. A single tendril reached toward you and brushed your chest. It passed through you like a sigh, like cool wine through open curtains. And suddenly, something unknotted. Not all at once, but in layers. You saw an old fear, one you'd carried for years, rise into the mist and dissolve. Then a regret. Then a name you once whispered to yourself in the dark. Each one lifted gently from you, touched the mist, and was gone. The bowl took them. Held them. Transformed them into quiet. The silence deepened. You felt it wrap around you like a second skin. Not heavy, not hollow. Full. Kind. You opened your eyes. The others still sat in stillness, yet one of them turned slightly and met your gaze. No words. Just a long, slow breath. And in that breath, you felt seen. The figure who led you here stood once more and extended a hand. You took it and rose. The boat had returned, now tied loosely to the edge of the platform. No one had tied it. It simply knew when to come back. You stepped in. The boat accepted you again without sound. As it drifted away, the figures on the platform raised their hands, not in farewell, but in blessing. Their palms glowed faintly with the same soft light that had danced behind your eyes. You placed your own hand to your heart and let the silence settle deeper. The mist curled around the platform behind you and gently disappeared from view as the boat carried you forward once again, farther into the river's remembering. The river welcomed you back with a soundless sigh, its waters darkening slightly to a shade of indigo threaded with silver. The current resumed with grace, and the boat moved as if remembering exactly where it had left off. You reclined gently, letting your fingers hover over the surface, feeling the coolness without touching it. The silence within you had deepened, not as absence but as presence, something living, breathing, aware. The trees here grew lower, their trunks wide and roots exposed, curling into the river like sleeping giants cradling dreams. Their leaves shimmered with a new color, one you couldn't name but recognized somewhere deep inside you. The sky above was no longer the soft light of dawn or dusk, but a canvas painted with motion, like waves of memory rolling across it, slow and translucent. You watched as a flock of translucent birds passed overhead, wings beating without sound. Their flight left trails of light that lingered briefly in the air, tracing arcs of forgotten paths. The boat drifted past another figure, this one seated on a large flat stone that jutted out into the water. They were weaving something between their fingers, thin threads of color pulled from the air itself. As you passed, they nodded once, then gently released a length of the weaving into the wind. It fluttered upward, caught a breath of invisible breeze, and dissolved like morning mist. The river curved again, narrowing into a silvery ribbon that passed between smooth stone banks. Here, everything echoed. Not loudly, but subtly, as if your breath, your heartbeat, the faint brush of your hair against your shoulder all belonged to something larger that was listening with love. You felt no urgency. No fear. Only the sense of approaching something that had waited for you patiently, without expectation. A distant chime sounded then, faint, delicate, like porcelain touched by wind. The sound rang once, then drifted outward in concentric waves that didn't disturb the water, but passed through you. It reached places within that you hadn't visited in years. You remembered standing by a window once, watching rain fall and knowing, without knowing why, that you were not alone. That moment returned to you not as thought, but as warmth. Another chime. The boat responded, turning toward the sound. It came from a bend hidden by low-hanging branches heavy with silver blossoms. As the boat passed beneath them, the petals shimmered, then began to fall, one by one, onto the surface of the river. Each petal dissolved without a ripple, releasing a faint glow as it disappeared. The scent was gentle and unfamiliar, like the inside of a dream you weren't meant to wake from. The third chime rang just as the boat slipped through the curtain of branches and into the open light beyond. Beyond the branches lay a vast stretch of river so still it felt as though time had been suspended mid-thought. The water reflected not only the sky but something deeper, patterns and symbols that seemed to drift just below the surface, forming and reforming with each breath you took. They weren't letters, nor images, but feelings and shape. A longing shaped like a spiral. A joy shaped like soft light radiating outward. The boat slowed again, gliding into the center of this quiet expanse. The air here shimmered with a pale gold hue, warmer than sunlight, gentler than fire. Above you, the sky deepened to a blue that hinted at stars not yet revealed. You felt them waiting, patient in their distance. Then, the boat stopped. It didn't touch shore, there was no shore. Just the stillness. The chimes sounded again, this time from all directions. Gentle, bell-like tones that layered and folded into one another like water folding over itself. You sat upright, listening. Something was arriving. From the far edge of the horizon, a shape began to form. A light, slow-moving and soft, like a lantern floating underwater. It grew as it approached, resolving into the form of another boat, this one glowing faintly from within. Aboard it stood a figure. Not robed. Not shrouded. Simply there. Their features were undefined, as if made of light wrapped in memory. And yet you knew them. Not by name or role, but by presence. They carried something that felt like you. The two boats drew closer until they floated side by side. The figure raised their hand, not in greeting, but in invitation. And without thinking, you reached out and placed your palm against theirs. The touch sent a wave of warmth through your chest, soft and steady. You closed your eyes. And suddenly, you were no longer only here. You were there too, in the other boat, in the sky, in the water. You were memory and present. Thought and quiet. And with that realization came a single, quiet truth. You had never been alone. Not in any of it. The figure's face changed then, just for a moment, shifting into one you had known and loved, long ago. A flash of kindness, of gentle laughter, of someone who once held your hand when the world had been too loud. Then it shifted again. Another face. Then another. Each one familiar in a way that made your heart ache, not with sadness, but with recognition. They had all been with you. Pieces of them still shimmered in the river. Still lived in the breeze. Still whispered in dreams. The figure let go of your hand and bowed slightly. Not goodbye. Thank you. And then their boat began to drift away, fading slowly into the golden horizon until it was once more just light. The chimes ceased. The water rippled once. And your boat began to move again. The boat floated onward through the golden light, though something within you had shifted. You were no longer merely a traveler. You were becoming part of the river itself. Woven into its memory, held in its current like a secret whispered gently to the wind. The water began to narrow once more, the glassy stillness giving way to soft ripples. The trees returned, this time bearing luminous orbs that hung from their branches like fruit made of starlight. They swayed slightly as you passed, casting dappled light across your face, your hands, the bow of the boat. Each orb pulsed gently, releasing a faint chime that echoed deep within your chest. You could feel your breath sinking with them, as if the forest was helping you remember how to inhale peace and exhale forgetting. A soft breeze stirred, carrying with it a scent like summer rain and old parchment. You leaned back against the boat's edge and looked skyward. The stars had emerged now, dim at first, then sharpening into clarity, each one blinking slowly, deliberately, as if watching you from great distance with nothing but love. Ahead, the river forked. The current didn't pull you in any one direction. It waited. You realized you could choose. To the left, the water glimmered like dawn, pale rose and pearl and soft amber. To the right, it shimmered with indigo and silver, colors like midnight breath and stillness. Neither path frightened you. Neither promised anything more than what already was: presence, peace, return. You whispered something, though you weren't sure what. A word. A name. A sound that felt like home. And with that, the boat gently turned. The right-hand fork opened into a corridor of quiet mist, and the trees grew closer once more. The river whispered again, this time in a language you almost understood. Not words, but emotions shaped like echoes. Comfort. Forgiveness. Unburdening. The boat passed a low stone wall built along the edge of the riverbank. Tiny candles floated within it, each flame a soft memory. Some flickered as you passed, others bowed low, and one brightened, just briefly. As if in greeting. You had once been here, in a dream or a moment between waking. The wall, the candles, the hush, they welcomed you like an old song. You dipped your fingers into the water again. It felt warmer now, more familiar. Like the embrace of something ancient that had always known your name, even when you had forgotten it. You let your hand rest there, dragging slowly through the current, until it became impossible to tell where your skin ended and the water began. You were returning, but not to a place. To yourself. The current deepened its rhythm, not rushing, but pulsing like a heartbeat beneath your boat. The mist parted just enough to reveal lanterns suspended above the river, hundreds of them, hanging from branches of unseen trees high above. Each one flickered with a soft, golden glow, and as you passed beneath them, they dimmed and brightened in time with your breath. The path they marked wasn't straight. It wound gently, looping around bends and brushing against floating gardens of lily and moss. At one bend, the boat slowed entirely. You looked to your right and saw a wooden dock nestled into the curve of the riverbank. Upon it stood a table with no legs, just a surface floating above the dock, hovering, perfectly level. Upon the table lay a mirror. You leaned forward slightly as your boat drifted past, and your reflection shimmered into view. But it wasn't the you of now. It was you as a child, eyes wide with wonder, hands stained with paint or mud or joy. You watched this version of yourself reach forward, place their small hand on the surface of the mirror, and then smile, not at the reflection, but at you. The smile didn't ask anything. It simply reminded. You closed your eyes and held that smile in your chest like a lantern of your own. When you opened them, the boat had passed the dock, and the mirror was gone. But the warmth remained. Ahead, the mist thinned further, revealing large pale stones rising from the river like stepping stones meant for giants. Etched into each stone were symbols, some geometric, others fluid, almost like letters, but not from any language you knew. You recognized them anyway. Not as words, but as feelings. Each one evoked something, a moment of bravery, a breath of laughter, the weight of a tear shed in silence. The stones told the river's story, and your story too. There was no separation. You had been carving these shapes with each step, each choice, each moment of surrender. As you drifted past, one stone glowed faintly, just for you. A shape like an open palm wrapped in a spiral of light. It needed no explanation. It was permission. The permission to be, just as you were. No names. No roles. Just being. The boat turned once more, following the invisible thread of the current. The lanterns above faded slowly behind you, and ahead, the stars thickened. They weren't distant anymore. They seemed to float just above the river, close enough to reach if you only stretched a little farther. You didn't. Not yet. You weren't finished remembering. The river narrowed once again, drawing you inward as if inviting you into its innermost chamber. The boat floated in silence, but you could feel the current beneath it working gently, like hands guiding a cradle. Above, the stars shimmered more brightly, no longer distant points but soft orbs that pulsed with presence. They didn't just hang in the sky, they listened. They remembered. The trees along the bank had changed too. Their bark shimmered like mica, catching glimmers of starlight, and their branches arched overhead to form a cathedral of quiet. Leaves drifted slowly down, not falling, but descending with intention, settling on the river's surface and floating past like notes of a lullaby. In the hush, you began to hear a new sound. A voice, not outside you, but not your own either. It hummed gently, a sound without syllables, like the river was singing through your bones. You didn't try to understand it. You simply let it vibrate through you. Every note untangled something tight. Every pause gave space for breath. You reached out again, trailing your fingers through the water, and the river responded. It shimmered beneath your touch and offered you something, a shape. You cupped your hand and lifted it. Resting there was a single, translucent stone, pale blue and pulsing with a slow rhythm, as though it carried a memory of the river's heartbeat. You held it against your chest. It was warm, familiar. You felt it dissolve, not into water, but into light, and that light soaked through your skin like rain through thirsty earth. The light didn't disappear. It stayed within you, resting beneath your ribs. The boat turned once more and approached a clearing where the water widened into a circle. At its center floated an island no larger than the boat itself, draped in long grass that shimmered white under the stars. A single tree stood in the center, tall, leafless, and glowing faintly from within its bark. The boat slowed. Stopped. Waited. You knew what to do. You stepped out, feet bare on the soft grass, and approached the tree. It didn't speak, yet you could feel its awareness wrap around you like a shawl. In its trunk, just at eye level, was a hollow. Within the hollow sat another mirror. You looked inside. This time, the reflection was not of your face, but of the river. All of it. Its past, its bends, its forgotten whispers, its quiet gifts. You saw where you had entered, where you had let go, where you had listened, where you had begun again. You understood then, the river did not forget you. It forgot your pain, your burden, your need to carry what was never yours. But it remembered you. The whole of you. And that was enough. You stood before the tree a while longer, letting its quiet strength seep into you. It didn't ask anything of you. It didn't require you to change or explain or prove. It simply stood, steady and present, as if to say, you are allowed to rest here. You touched its bark. It felt like moonlight. Smooth, cool, pulsing gently beneath your fingertips, alive with the memory of roots and rain. The river circled the island silently, as though it, too, were taking a breath. You stepped back onto the boat, and it accepted your return without sound or motion. Only once you settled did it move again, gently gliding into a new corridor, one where the water turned a deeper shade of violet. Above, the stars had begun to shimmer with a different light. Pale greens and soft coppers, as though the sky itself was remembering a forgotten season. A breeze moved through, wrapping around you like a shawl of sighs. You watched the riverbank unfold into vast fields of tall grass that swayed without wind. Fireflies drifted lazily in clusters, blinking in no pattern at all, like a forgotten language trying to remember itself. You passed a grove where figures sat in circles, each one cradling a bowl of water that reflected a single star. They didn't look up as you passed. They simply stared into their bowls, quiet, reverent, as if each star held a message only they could hear. One of them looked toward you then, and in their eyes, you saw your own face, not as it was now, but as it had been in a dream you once forgot upon waking. It smiled. You didn't wave. You didn't speak. You simply held their gaze for a moment, then let it pass like everything else. The river narrowed once more, winding between tall reeds that whispered as the boat passed. Their rustling voices brushed against your skin like the pages of a book turning slowly. You understood none of the words, and yet the meaning reached you. They spoke of softness, of release, of becoming less and more all at once. The boat came to a place where the river vanished into mist. No horizon, no shore. Just vapor, shifting and glowing, waiting. You weren't afraid. Not even curious. Only open. The boat didn't stop this time. It moved forward into the mist, and the world around you became formless. The only sound was your breath, steady and unhurried. Then the boat stilled. There was no motion beneath it, no current. You had arrived somewhere, though no place revealed itself. You closed your eyes. And the river whispered, one last time, your name, not the one given to you, but the one born of every moment you had chosen to let go and float. The whisper of your true name faded into the mist like a memory returned to where it belonged. You sat still, the boat no longer a vessel, but a space suspended in a kind of timeless breath. Around you, the mist pulsed with soft color, lavender, pearl, moongray, blending and shifting like clouds painted by feeling. Then, slowly, the mist parted, not completely, but just enough for you to see a path forming ahead. Not a path of water, but of light. Thin strands, braided together like a silver ribbon, stretched ahead of the boat. And though you floated, it felt as though you were walking now, step by quiet step, deeper into yourself. Shapes began to emerge. Not solid things, but impressions, a table where laughter once echoed, a staircase once climbed in a dream, the flutter of pages turning in a book you never finished but still remember. Each one passed like a soft exhale, and you let them go without needing to hold them again. The river. The place you were, the feeling you'd become, offered no judgment, only space. You felt your breath shift deeper, slower. You weren't just floating now. You were dissolving, not into nothing, but into everything you had always been beneath the noise. The boat eased forward, following the ribbon of light through the remaining veil of mist. Then, ahead, a glow began to build. It wasn't bright. It was steady. Like the heart of a lighthouse pulsing in the distance of a dream. As you moved closer, you saw a shoreline forming, a soft curve of land where grass shimmered silver and sky met earth in seamless silence. The boat touched the edge of it with barely a sound, and you stepped out once more. Your feet met the earth, and it greeted you like an old friend. No resistance. No announcement. Just acceptance. Ahead stood a structure, low and round, woven from branches that shimmered like moonlight caught in movement. There were no walls, only arches, each one leading into a single open room. And in that room, a circle of cushions. A fire burned low in the center, not flames, but light, golden and slow turning, like warmth given shape. You stepped inside. Others were there, seated already. Some you recognized without memory. Others you didn't recognize but still knew. They looked at you without expectation, and in their presence you found rest. You took your place in the circle. No one spoke. The fire pulsed gently, casting soft light across their faces, faces that changed slowly, moment by moment, as if becoming more true with each breath. You realized yours was changing too. Not into someone new, but into who you had always been, beneath the layers of forgetting. You closed your eyes and listened to the hush that welcomed you. The hush wrapped around you like velvet, thick with presence yet light as breath. The fire at the center of the room didn't crackle or flicker. It swayed gently, like a candle dancing in the rhythm of a lullaby only the soul could hear. You sat in stillness, but within you, a deep river continued to move, no longer rushing or searching, but spiraling slowly inward, into the center of everything. The others remained quiet, their eyes half closed or turned softly toward the firelight. There were no introductions, no names exchanged. You understood now why none were needed. In this place, what you were was known, and who you had been was gently resting. Across from you, one of the figures reached into the circle and lifted something small, a bell made not of metal but of glass woven with starlight. They rang at once. The sound rippled out like the first drop of rain after a long drought. It didn't fill the room so much as empty it, of tension, of expectation, of weight. Another figure placed a hand over their heart and exhaled softly. It was a gesture of release, and one by one, each person mirrored it. You did too. And when you did, you felt something lift. Not pain. Not sorrow. Just the tightness that had lived behind your ribs for so long you'd forgotten it was there. The bell rang again, softer now. And with its sound came the vision of a place, another place, far from here and yet stitched into the fabric of this moment. A hillside under moonlight, a swing hanging from a tree, the hush before someone tells you a secret. These memories weren't yours alone. They belonged to all of you, shared like stories written on wind. The light from the fire brightened just a little, illuminating the woven arches above. They shimmered as if dusted with frost, then slowly unraveled, one by one, revealing the night sky above. But this sky wasn't vast or distant. It was close. You could see the stitching between the stars, the threads that held constellations like lanterns suspended in an invisible web. The sky looked down and smiled. Not a literal smile, just a sense, a shift in the light, the way you know someone is thinking of you even before they say a word. You lay back, letting your spine meet the soft curve of the earth beneath the cushions. Above, the stars blinked slowly, steady as breath. Around you, the circle exhaled in unison. The room was no longer a room, but a cradle of sky. And in that cradle, you felt yourself begin to float again, not upward, not outward, but inward still, where the river had always been waiting. You drifted within the cradle of sky, surrounded by others who had made the same journey, not with maps or footsteps, but through surrender. Above, the stars continued their gentle shimmer, not watching, but being with you. Companions, not observers. You felt your body soften against the cushion beneath you, your breath so slow and full it no longer felt like effort. You weren't resting. You were rest. A presence to yourself. A being not trying to become anything else. One of the figures beside you reached into the circle again, this time drawing from the fire a single thread of light. It shimmered and shifted as they passed it between their fingers, then gently extended it toward you. You took it without question. It didn't burn. It hummed softly in your hand, vibrating with familiarity. The moment you touched it, memories began to unfurl, not as pictures, but as feelings. The first time you were held without needing to speak. The first time silence made you feel seen. The first time you forgave yourself without needing permission. The thread lengthened, drifting through your fingers like water, and with each inch, more softness returned to you. The light didn't show you what to be. It reminded you of what you had always been. The thread faded slowly, not vanishing but sinking into your skin, becoming part of you. Across the circle, another figure smiled, not at you, but because of you. As if your remembering had brought them peace too. A ripple of wind moved through the open circle, brushing against your skin like a sigh from the trees. And in its wake, the cushions began to dissolve, gently, like sugar melting into tea. Until each person floated just above the ground, supported by nothing but belonging. You looked down and saw that the earth beneath you was no longer made of soil or stone. It was woven from light, moving softly like fabric in slow motion. You could see patterns within it, symbols you'd seen carved into the stones along the river's edge. Spirals. Waves. Hands. A single eye closed in sleep. The fire dimmed, leaving only embers, and even those began to rise, one by one, floating upward toward the stars. You watched them go, and for the first time, you felt no need to follow. You were already where you needed to be. The arches that had once formed the structure's boundaries had melted away entirely. The space was open now, limitless, but it didn't feel empty. It felt held. You felt held. And in that vast, quiet stillness, you let yourself be. Just be. The sky above pulsed in time with your breath, and you realized you had become part of its rhythm. The stars blinked in unison with your heartbeat, not matching it, but gently guiding it, slower, steadier, softer. Around you, the others had begun to rise, not with movement, but with presence. Their forms remained seated, yet something within them stretched outward, blending with the space, like ink dropped into still water. You were doing the same. The edges of yourself, the parts once tightly drawn and named, were softening, becoming porous, interwoven with the river, the light, the hush. You closed your eyes, and instead of darkness, you saw a field. Endless, wild, and silver blue under a never-setting moon. You stood in the field, barefoot, arms open. The grass reached your waist, and wind moved through it like a voice singing from far away. That voice wasn't calling you. It was welcoming you. It said nothing, but it wrapped you in sound that had no weight, only peace. You walked through the field without direction. There was nowhere to reach. Every step was arrival. Petals fell from an unseen bloom above, pale, luminous, soft as breath. They brushed your shoulders, your hair, your fingertips, and vanished the moment they touched the earth, as if they existed only to remind you of gentleness. You reached a rise in the land where the field dropped away into a slope, and below, you saw the river again. It wound through the valley like a ribbon of memory, shining faintly beneath the stars. It hadn't gone. It had only widened, making space for you to become part of it in a new way. You descended the hill slowly, barefoot, feeling each blade of grass yield beneath your steps. At the bottom, the river greeted you not with sound, but with silence that shimmered. It parted just slightly, enough to reveal a small pool at its edge. Within the pool was no reflection, only light. You knelt beside it and reached in. The water was warm. It gathered around your hand like recognition. And then, from its depths, another hand reached back, not physical, not separate. It was your own, from another time. From every time. You grasped it gently, and for a moment, you held all the versions of yourself that had ever longed to be seen. You didn't speak. You simply stayed. And in that stillness, they softened. One by one, they dissolved into the water, into you, into the hush. You stood again, feeling lighter. Not less, but more true. The river flowed on, and now, you flowed with it. The river no longer needed to carry you. It was you now, winding through the soft contours of the land like a thought returning home. You followed it, not walking, not floating, simply moving the way light does through leaves. The valley opened wider with each breath, not revealing more, but becoming more. Trees rose in clusters, their trunks smooth as bone and leaves that shimmered like memory. Between them, the air shimmered with golden dust, as if stories long held had been released all at once, grateful to be free. As you passed beneath their canopy, the trees offered no words, only presence. You leaned your shoulder against one and felt it exhale. Not literally, but deeply. And you realized you were exhaling too, shedding every moment you'd held too tightly, every version of yourself you'd worn like a nameplate. They slid from you like dew from a leaf. You kept moving until you reached a hollow, round and shallow, filled with mist. At its center stood a pool of still water, smooth as glass. It reflected nothing but the sky, though you could see the ground beneath it. The contradiction felt familiar, like a dream that forgets its dreaming. You stepped to its edge and knelt once more, placing your palm just above the surface. The water responded not with ripples, but with light. A pattern emerged, spirals, arcs, lines that moved like breath, and then stilled into a single shape, a door. Not a physical one, not even a vision, but the feeling of a door opening inside you. You didn't need to step through it. It stepped through you. And suddenly, you remembered the first moment you felt peace, true peace. Not relief, not distraction, but peace that held you without asking you to hold it back. That moment had no time attached to it. It could have been today. Or 10,000 years ago. It didn't matter. It was real. The pool dimmed, its light settling into stillness again. Behind you, the air shifted, and you turned to see the others once more, those who had shared the circle, the boat, the silence. They stood not beside you, but within you. Not merged, not erased, just present. As if you'd always carried them, and now they'd remembered. One by one, they nodded, not as farewell, but as recognition. You returned the nod. The wind rose gently, not to move you, but to lift something final from your shoulders. It scattered like dust across the valley, caught in golden light. You were free now. Free to go on. Or stay. Or simply be. The choice wasn't asked of you. It was already yours. You stood at the edge of the hollow, the mist around your ankles swirling slowly, cool but not cold. The air was so quiet it felt like the world was listening to you breathe. No pressure. No gaze. Just the quiet holding of space, the kind you'd longed for without knowing how to name it. As you inhaled, the light of the valley seemed to pulse with you, soft and steady, like a lullaby that didn't need to be sung to be heard. The river curved gently around the hollow and waited, like an old friend offering you one last ride. You walked to it and stepped into the boat again, which had returned without sound, just as it always did. The wood welcomed your weight without creak or strain, and as you sat, the boat began to move once more, not forward, not back, but deeper. Down through the water, through layers of quiet, into the space beneath the surface where light shimmered without needing sun. You didn't sink. You descended like a feather falling into a pool of breath. And then you arrived, not at a place, but at a stillness. A silence that lived beneath all things. It was dark, but not empty. It was full, brimming, whole. You reached your hand into it and felt it reach back, not with fingers, but with knowing. You let it wrap around you, and for the first time, you understood that forgetting wasn't loss. It was trust. Trust that what mattered would return. Trust that what left wasn't meant to be carried. In the center of the stillness was a single light. Small. Steady. A quiet echo of all you had been and all you were still becoming. It didn't grow or change. It simply was. And it was enough. You floated there for a time outside of time, unmeasured and unmarked. And then the light expanded, not with brightness, but with warmth. A warmth so gentle it felt like being remembered by something you didn't know you had lost. You smiled. Not with lips, but with your whole being. The river lifted you again. Not up, but outward. Back into motion. Back into breath. The water rippled softly around you, and you saw the sky above once more, but it was different now. Closer. Familiar. Like coming home. The boat slowed, its journey nearing a close. And as it did, you felt nothing end. You felt only return. The river curved once more, its banks soft and open, and you knew you were almost back to the place where you'd entered. But it wasn't where you had started. It was where you began to remember. The river brought you gently to the shore, but this time, no hand reached to guide you. You didn't need it. The stillness you had found wasn't something you carried, it was you now, woven into your breath, your gaze, your heartbeat. The boat touched land and stilled, not with finality, but with quiet blessing. You stepped onto the shore, and the earth greeted your bare feet with warmth. The sky had begun to shift. Not into dawn, there was no sun here, but into something that felt like beginning. A pale glow traced the edges of the trees, and the wind carried the scent of something you couldn't quite name, only feel, possibility. Ahead was a small path, one you hadn't noticed before, though you realized now it had always been there. It wasn't hidden. It had only waited for you to be ready to see it. You followed the path as it curved gently through tall grasses that brushed your arms like old friends. Each step was lighter. Not because you weighed less, but because you no longer carried what you didn't need. The weight of being seen, of being enough, of knowing where you end and the world begins, those were gone. Or maybe, they had become part of everything. The path led you to a hill, low and round, and at its top, a single stone bench. You sat. From here, you could see the entire river winding below, every bend, every glimmer, every place you had passed. You watched it not with nostalgia, but with calm. It had brought you home. Not to a place, but to a self you had always known deep down, even when the world made you forget. The air shimmered with hush. A bird glided past overhead, silent as breath, its wings barely disturbing the sky. You closed your eyes. Not to sleep. Just to rest in stillness one more time. Behind your eyelids, you saw the thread of light again, the one you had once been handed, the one that sang with memory. But this time, you didn't need to hold it. It flowed through you, and you through it. You exhaled slowly. The kind of exhale that empties not just your lungs, but your spirit. An exhale of release. Of peace. When you opened your eyes, the world was unchanged. But you were not. The sky held its endless hush, the river its winding shimmer, the land its gentle breath. And you, soft, open, whole, sat quietly in it all, where the river had once forgotten your name. And in doing so, helped you remember who you truly were. You rose from the bench slowly, not with reluctance, but with grace. The journey had not taken you somewhere else, it had returned you to where you had always been, beneath the noise, beneath the names, beneath the trying. As you stepped from the hill, the path beneath your feet widened into a meadow glowing with dew. The grass shimmered like stars resting for a moment on earth before returning to the sky. And in that soft light, you walked not toward anything, but with everything. The hush was no longer around you, it was within. A quiet, unshakable knowing that no matter where you wandered next, the river would be with you. In every breath. In every silence. In the way your fingers softened when you let go, and in the way your chest opened when you remembered. You reached the edge of the meadow and turned, taking one final glance at the river far below. It gleamed like a thread of moonlight stitched through a dream. It had wound around you, through you, and now, it continued on. Not ending. Simply flowing forward, always ready for the next traveler willing to be still enough to remember. A breeze passed across your skin, light and cool, and you let it carry one last trace of who you used to be, those fragments of doubt, the old names, the weight of not knowing. They lifted into the sky like petals on wind, fading without sorrow. Ahead, the world waited. It wasn't different. But you were. Softer. Steadier. Still full of questions, perhaps, but now with space between them, enough space for breath, for grace, for rest. And when you stepped forward into that waiting world, it didn't greet you with noise or demand. It greeted you with a silence so profound it felt like a welcome home. You walked slowly, each step not a leaving but a continuing. You felt your name return. Not the one others gave you, not even the one you used to call yourself, but the name the river whispered back into you, a feeling more than a word. A sense of presence. Of being. Of enough. And in that name, unspoken, unseen, you moved forward, quiet and whole, through a world that no longer needed to define you. Because you had remembered. The river had forgotten your name. So you could remember who you truly were. And now, at last, you rested.